Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and it is part 10 of the Focke-Wulf Condor. And so far as I know, this will be the last episode of the build, at least the build portion. And as you can see, I've got the cover here, and I did do a wee bit of work, basically while I was waiting for the camera to charge up. The exhaust stubs, I gave them a little bit of rust. I will be putting some exhaust staining on, and the landing gear that I had not already put together, I glued that together, and then I set it into the landing gear well. And the reason you do that is there's quite a bit of play in the parts. You can't glue it together, set it aside, and expect that it's going to fit. You need to glue it together and then make sure that it's sitting in the spots so that it has the right shape. Now, I have started peeling my mask all off. As you can see, I've got it all off the back of our gondola here, and I'm just working on the front now. These complex assemblies are the lower portions of the main landing gear, and each one of these is made up of 6 separate parts. It certainly makes you think when you think of, the landing gear, let's say, on a B-17 compared to these things. These are so much more complex. And from what I understand, the landing gear was prone to collapsing. One thing is for sure, I'm nervous as to how strong they're going to be on the model. We'll have to see once we get it all together. On the subject of landing gear, I want to point out something that's kind of unusual in the way they've decided to do the wheels and the tires. First of all, considering that they didn't really make any sort of provision for having the propeller spin, which most people like a propeller-driven plane to be able to pose and move the propellers, they've gone to the effort of putting a separate hub inside the wheel itself, like that. So when you put this on the actual landing gear axle, if you're careful, these should be able to rotate. I'm not quite sure what the big benefit of this is, but they went to the effort of doing that. Something that I don't think is a waste of time, though, is they've molded the tires separately, which is nice because then you can do what I've done. And now the ones on the sprue, I've painted the entire wheel, but the nice thing is you can quickly slather your paint on the tire and you get a really nice, neat demarcation between the wheel and the tire itself. Now this one I only painted a little bit because I'd already taken them off the sprues. If we look at the sprues themselves, you can see that the ones that are still on the sprues, I painted the tire in its entirety. Now, once I've glued this together, it's no big deal to paint the tread, but it does make for a nice, clean wheel tire join. Because all too often, there'll be a very, very faint line going from tire to hub, and that can be tricky to make nice and neat. And they've made it really, really easy here. So I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not. I want to make sure that this area remains free of paint. This joint remains free of paint. And I figured while I was at it, the ends of the axles. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these spindly landing gear parts that just be a total pig to paint with a brush. And I'm just going to set them all up in the spray booth. I'm going to airbrush them all. So I'm figuring instead of scraping this stuff off later with a knife blade, if I put a little bit of mask all on there, hopefully I can just kind of grab it with my fingernails and yank most of it off. So we'll see if that was a good idea or not. So in order to paint the propellers a little bit easier, I've mounted them on these sticks. And the area that the stick is actually coming in contact is way up inside the spinner and has nothing to do with the area where the propeller peg that we dealt with a few episodes before is going to come in contact with. And I just find that propellers, the finish is so much better when you can airbrush them or spray paint them rather than brush painting them. So that's what we're going to do. There's my landing gear parts after a quick shot of Tester's steel. I know the parts are really made out of aluminum, but I like the look of the steel a little bit better. I will be painting these two parts right here chrome silver because that's part of the suspension, the oleo. And these pieces right here, I've seen this on other German aircraft, and basically it's kind of a cover that covers the telescoping part of the strut. And usually it's made out of a green canvasy material or a tan material. So I'm going to be painting those things that color. And my plan for just putting a little bit of mask all on the areas I wanted to leave clear, it actually worked pretty good. I was able to pick it off really easily. Here we've got the lower, or is it the upper portion of the landing gear. I suppose when the plane's not flipped over, these are the upper portions. And they are glued in place. The inside of the wheel wells, I got to touch up that little bit right there, were painted using, to me, a RLM gray. Just because, once again, I thought the German gray was just a little too dark and kind of hid what was in there. Now, these still need a little bit of a wash just to bring out the detail, but they have to be about the easiest wheels I've ever put together and painted for an aircraft to make it nice and neat. I mean, having the wheel centers separate from the tires, that made it so much easier. So I have to say, that's one thing I'll really give Trumpeter credit for, is making these main wheels easy. There we've got the upper and the lower landing gear supports in place. Getting close to putting those wheels on. Now the very tips of the propeller spinners are supposed to be green. And I was kind of laboring on how I was going to do that and make it look really regular. Because I figured if I freehanded it, one would look really large, the next one would look really small. So what I eventually came up with is taking a piece of masking tape and basically punching a hole in it with a hole punch, like what you use for, paper going into a 3-ring binder. And we'll see how this turns out. I'm just going to brush paint. Hopefully it'll be enough of a seal that I get a nice clean edge. And voila! That actually turned out pretty good. At least the first one. Hopefully the next 3 don't go disastrously. Whether that's the exact diameter it's supposed to be, I don't know. But as long as all 4 of them come out nice and neat and the same size and shape like that, I'll be happy. And there's what our wheels look like after a black wash has been applied. Just makes the detail stand out a little bit better. This is the first time it's sitting on its landing gear. And yep, it still looks pretty fragile, although I think Trumpeter probably did about the best that it possibly could. Let's see how many times I can break them before I'm actually done this model. I don't know if this is the right time to put this on, but the antenna has to go on at some point, and I know I'm going to knock it off anyway. Thing is, I've got to get it on there so I can put some paint on it. Or, sorry, I should say the antenna mast, because the antenna itself goes from there to the tail. Here's our canopy after I've removed the masking tape. Now, I did leave the tape on a little longer than I should have, but it was okay because any glue residue from the masking tape is easily removed by using a cotton swab with a little bit of WD-40 on it. If you ever need to remove a price tag, or if you've got to remove any sort of adhesive goo from glass or plastic, WD-40 will do it. And before I permanently glue this in place, I'll be painting this area, which is currently unpainted. I'm going to paint that flat black because that's the instrument panel combing, and that would have some sort of non-glare finish on it. Well, it is about 9:30 on Sunday morning. I've been home from work maybe about 45 minutes. And I literally have maybe a dozen things left to do before this plane is finished. And I just want to get this done, and I want to get the video up today. I'm doing a final push to see if I can get everything done. But at any rate, here are the guts of the turrets. And I'm going to be gluing those to their transparencies in a couple minutes. Two things that I should have done last night before I started final assembly on the upper surfaces is I should have put my landing gear doors on, and the bomb carriers, I really should have put those on last night before I started cluttering up the upper surfaces. If I flip it over, you can see now that I've got the radio mast there, I really can't just plunk it onto its back and work on the underside. So that's the guts of our rear turret installed and glued in place. And here's the front turret. Now it's a very, very tight press fit. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I think it'll stay in there all right on its own. Now in preparation for putting the antenna on, hopefully you can see it, I've drilled a very small hole in the top of the antenna mast. And then I've drilled another one in the top of the tail, which oddly enough the camera doesn't want to focus on. Well. Anywho, that's going to be receiving the piece of Lycra, and I'm hopefully going to come up with a bit better join than I usually do when I put the antenna in. So we seem to have made a good connection on the top of the antenna mast, and it's fairly neat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put the Lycra, that's what this is, Lycra, into the hole in a little bit of tension, then I'll add a drop of glue there, and hopefully we can get a nice clean bond like we did up on the antenna mast. Alright, there we are, anchored onto the tail, and it's a fairly unobtrusive dab of glue. And the nice thing is being Lycra, it is fairly compliant. Now looking down here, we can see that I've glued the door in place, and I found to have it in the completely open, hard up against the fuselage position, that the hinges weren't anywhere near long enough to accomplish that. Even then, to get the door in this position, I had to put some small extenders on there. I'm probably going to regret this the fourth or fifth time I knock it off, but I'm not planning on playing with this. I'm planning on putting it on display. So it's Monday morning, and the model isn't done. I probably could have gotten it done and gotten the video edited, but while I was waiting for some stuff to dry, I figured let's start editing the video. And I went upstairs and plugged my laptop in, and all I had was battery power. The adapter wasn't giving me any juice. And the computer basically said, well, you have an hour and a half, if I was lucky, and that wasn't going to be enough to get the editing done. So I did a little bit more work on the model, but basically said, the heck with it, seeing as I wasn't going to be able to do any work until I could get a new adapter. So I'm here at the computer store to get another adapter, hopefully. Alright, we have propellers. And believe it or not, they all turn. Although none of them freely enough that you can blow on them to get them to spin. Oh darn. So we're really coming down to the wire here. I need to glue the pitot tube on, paint it blue. The marker lights have been painted silver. They just need some Tamiya clear red and green. The antenna has had some silver Sharpie applied to it. And the only other thing really is I want to do some exhaust streaking from all of these exhaust pipes. So we're getting close. We can taste it. Did I say this side for the pitot tube? I meant this side. And it's quite a pitot tube, that's for sure. Mounts the underside of the wing in a nice little fairing, which is nice. And we have our wingtip lights are painted. A little bit of Tamiya clear, red and green over some chrome silver. And now I'm going to attempt some weathering, basically just a little bit of soot, I'm hoping, from the exhaust stubs. For my exhaust staining, I'm using this charcoal artist pencil here. And what I've done is I've just kind of grated it using a coarse file into this little tray. And I was trying to use a Q-tip, but I actually find that this really cheap paintbrush here seems to work best. And on the upper surfaces, it's a little more subtle. Hopefully you can see it going back from the exhaust stubs. On the underside, and I really want to keep it from going too heavy on the underside, there we go. You can see it on the underside. Now, I haven't done these nacelles, so you can kind of look at those for comparison. I don't want it to be too extreme, and I think sometimes we forget that most military aircraft in a wartime setting didn't necessarily have a very long lifespan. And I also tried to make sure that I got it on the landing gear doors as well. Now, you can see the bomb carriers here, and I was just going to throw some sky on those. And then I remembered, I think it was Air Enthusiast magazine, somebody had pointed out that actually most bomb carriers are supposed to be left natural metal, and the reason is you want to be able to inspect them for cracks and things like that because they hold quite a heavy load. Now, I know that was an RAF practice. I don't know what the Luftwaffe did, but I just decided to leave them as being a metal color just because it looked more interesting, I guess, really. Alright, so there is our exhaust staining. I went back and darkened up some of the strips on the wing I did first, just because it was difficult to see. Alrighty. I think we need to clean up this bench so we can take some glamour shots. Of course, by clean up, you knew I meant just shove everything off to the side. So I have just enough space to get some shots here. keen-eyed viewers will notice that in the previous shots, the front machine gun wasn't installed. I noticed that about halfway through the photos, so here we go. I have actually put it on. Now, I did not put either of the bombs on, mainly because I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to copy those bombs so I'd be able to make more bombs in the future. So right now, one of the bombs is in pieces in a rubber mold. So there we are. It took a few months, but it is complete. And I just stuck a BF-109 next to it just to give you some idea of just how enormous this thing is. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on modeling.